Okay, so Tristan, it's great to have you back on the show. And so there's so much going on. Let's just jump right into it. Trump has bragged that he gave Israeli military secrets to Russia. So do me a favor, tell me, do you think that Trump has supplied intelligence that ultimately helped Hamas?
You know, the fact that we even have to ask this question is exactly why we have the Espionage Act in place, right? The whole point here is not that we should have to be able to prove that he gave X to Y and to Z and that it had all these effects. We have the law in place to say you can't have improper retention of any of those kind of documents. Now, the documents that you're referring to, that was him bragging about those secrets, giving them to Sergei Lavrov while Trump was still in the White House. So yeah, it raises all sorts of questions about what capabilities were actually given to foreign powers, including Russia. We know that a lot of the other documents that were at issue in the Mar-a-Lago document stash were documents that had to do with other allies and their military capabilities. So unfortunately, we don't know for sure, but there are more questions than answers at this point. But it really looks there's quite a lot of smoke and there might be fire.
So who's going to ask the questions? How do we, as citizens of this country, we are entitled. I don't understand what's going on in Congress, not just on the Republican side, but on the Democratic side as well. And I get that the Democrats are frustrated because the House is right now controlled by Republicans. So any type of investigation that could be injurious to the orange Jesus somehow manages to be ignored. What I'm trying to figure out is, how do we demand transparency? I would like to know whether or not the documents that he showed Sergei Lavrov, the documents that he had shown to the billionaire that was the Australian billionaire at Mar-a-Lago, or whether the documents that he was waving around, whether or not these, including the potential Iran attack, I would like to know whether or not these had deleterious effect upon the safety and security of Israel, more importantly, the safety and security of the United States of America.
I'm with you, Michael. I really don't understand what's going on with a lot of these things either. I'm hopeful that maybe there are some things going on that we're not privy to in terms of grand jury investigations going on with DOJ. There has been a lot of chatter that there is still a grand jury. We know a little bit that there is definitely still a grand jury hearing testimony regarding the pilfered documents, and there's been chatter that could result in a second indictment, potentially that would be in a different district like New Jersey or DC. And I wonder if they're getting into some of these other topics about not just that the documents were retained, which by itself is a felony, but that the documents then, in fact, did make their way into the hands of people that shouldn't have had them, and that some of that could have been intentional. We don't know. I also share your frustration with the lack of aggressiveness or just even assertiveness that we're seeing out of the Senate Democrats. Yes, it's obviously the House is in Republican hands, and they're going to put the kibosh on anything that comes anywhere near Trump. However, on the Senate side, there's not nearly enough going on. Only now, it took 6 months of this year, maybe even longer. It took the better part of 2023 for us to finally get subpoenas out of the Senate Judiciary Committee on Harlan Crow and on what exactly was done with regard to Clarence Thomas and his finances. That's how long that took. It shouldn't have taken that long. I think the first ProPublica piece on Clarence Thomas and all of his sugar daddies came out at some point in, I want to say March. I'd have to go look it up. But it took that long. It's taken forever. I don't know why we're not seeing more action being taken on here. And I'll throw in one other thing, which is that, again, this could be a coincidence or it might not be a coincidence. But we know that the time at which Trump was taking these documents was obviously January of 2021. In the fall of 2021, I think it was October, there was a special bulletin put out by U.S. intelligence services saying that there had been an increased number of U.S. intelligence assets overseas. We're talking about spies. We're talking about spies, foreign national spies providing intelligence to the United States, that an increased number of them were being killed, captured, or compromised. And this was highly, highly unusual, but there was a massive uptick that was so large and such a big problem that they actually issued a report about this, effectively went public. Intelligence services never go public with anything. They went public with this about 9 months after Trump left office. Is that a coincidence? We don't know.
Yeah. The old expression, where there's smoke, there's fire. It just seems realistic. But, for my listeners, I want them to understand a little bit about who Tristan Snell is. You were part of the prosecutorial team against Trump University on behalf of the New York Attorney General case. And there's a lot of similarities between the Trump University case that was done under Eric Schneiderman, correct?
Yep. Yes,
and
that's right.
And the case that's currently right now pending by Attorney General Tish James. They are both civil cases. Trump University, there was no criminal process for that. That was civil as well. So on par with that civil case, how do you think that Tish James and her prosecutorial staff are doing?
I think they're doing a heck of a job. They're not going to win. Put it this way, I would challenge anybody, even you and I, Michael, to name any of the attorneys that are working for Tish James on this matter, the ones that have been appearing in court.
Colleen Farrelly.
We don't know who any of them are.
Colleen Farrelly.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, you got one.
Kevin Wallace.
That's good. Oh, yes, Kevin Wallace. That's right.
they're the two lead.
You got
counsel.
two. That's pretty good.
Thank you.
That's
Thank you
pretty
very
good.
much.
Well,
don't forget how involved I was.
You have an unfair advantage.
I sure do. But tell me, how do you think they're doing?
Here's the thing. But that's by design. It's not, I'm proud of it, got to work in that office. I was there for 3 years. It is not a place it's not about being a star there. You're not going to get headlines. You're not going to get in front of the cameras. That's not what you're there for. It is an office where you put your head down and you grind it out. And that's the ethos there. It's very much a workman-like mentality. And that's what they've done with this case. You're not going to remember any sort of gotcha moments or any sort of there's no Perry Mason, there's no Matlock, there's no Law and Order moments going on in this trial. It's just bricklaying, brick by brick by brick. They're setting up this case. By the way, again, which they've already won a big chunk of it. Mm-hmm. But this trial, which has been going on and on and on and on, but they're just laying the bricks in the wall, putting them all together. I think they've done a very, very good job of that. They're going to have more work to do on appeal, but I think they've done a very good job. And yes, like the Trump University case, this is a civil enforcement action being brought under what's called Executive Law 6312, which is a key statute that allows the AG's office to go after persistent or repeated fraud or illegality. And it is what we relied on in the Trump org case for the property valuation fraud.
And let's not forget, I believe the settlement in the Trump University case was what, $28 million, give or take?
25 mil.
25 million?
25 mil.
Yeah. Question for you. Were you involved in the ultimate settlement? Would you have known where the funds actually came? Because there's always been this sort of shroud of question that money was not even paid by Donald. It was by some mega donor who ultimately put the money up for him. That would be something interesting to find out.
I believe number one, I was actually not at the office anymore when we reached the settlement. So I left the office in 2014. The settlement happened in November 2016, and then it was finalized in the courts a year or so after that. In terms of who paid the settlement, I believe that I've seen reports that he actually borrowed that money, that was something he got in a loan, that's where it came from. But I would have to go back and look that up. I do think it's overall an interesting question. I think how he pays for anything is an interesting question. And then that brings us to the $40 million thing, which I'm guessing you're probably going to ask about. But I have some thoughts around that and what it signifies in terms of his ability to come up with cash for things.
Well, let's hear it then, because that was what I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
In fact, I was going to ask you a question. I was going to ask you a question before that. You know, a lot of people, especially the Trump team, are criticizing Tish James for her daily, we'll call it like her daily analysis of the testimony of the case. And of course, Trump's team says it's just highly, it's just highly wrong for the attorney general to be doing that she's making it all about her, which of course was how she ended up on her platform running for attorney general to get Donald and so on. Now, of course, this is Team Trump making these statements. What's your position on that? Because Schneiderman did the same thing, by the way.
Sure. So it's okay for Trump to offer his analysis and get on his bully pulpit, get on his soapbox to do this, but it's not okay for the elected attorney general of the state of New York. Can't do that? That's apparently the standard here, I guess. Show me an elected prosecutor who doesn't do such things. That would be the anomaly. They are elected political figures. They need to be actually showing to the people that they're doing the work that they were voted in to do. So of course she's going to do that. It's not improper for her to do that. She's simply, she's engaging in some summarizing and editorializing, but she's an elected official. She's allowed to go do that. In fact, it's really her job. And yes, it's something that Schneiderman did. It's something that Andrew Cuomo did when he was New York AG. It was something that Rudy Giuliani used to do. And in fact, he really was one of the people who started using the media more as a, not even elected, but as a prosecutor when he was the appointed head of the Southern District as a federal prosecutor back in the 80s. But the idea that you're going to then have you're going to have that lead prosecutor do a press conference. Yeah, that's going to happen. Of course it's going to happen. And it's perfectly appropriate for it to work that way. In terms of the $40 million, I think the real key there is he took it from the one entity that he wasn't allowed to touch, or that he had to report if he was taking money from it. All the places all over the world where he could potentially get money from. And the one cookie jar that he took the money from was the one that the state of New York and the judge were sitting there looking at. That's the one he takes the money from. To me, what that says is he's not able to really get bank loans nearly as much as he used to be able to. I also think the fact that he didn't try to get that money, and what's the money being used for? He paid a $29 million tax bill, supposedly, and a $5.5 million payment to E. Jean Carroll, arising from that jury verdict earlier this year for defamation and sexual assault. The fact that he couldn't come up with that cash from some other means, to me shows that he's really having a liquidity crunch, and also shows to me that he's wary of pulling that money too much from his political donations, because that's the place where we know he can raise very large amounts of money. But the problem there is that he really is not supposed to be using that for personal use. And he has been. He's been paying for a lot of his legal bills in all of these cases using political donations, which already is very suspicious. And we have reason to believe that it's actually getting investigated. God knows if that will go anywhere, but he's probably committing campaign finance.
Yeah, that one's not going to be a problem. On top of it. Yeah, I don't see that as being a problem. If anyone takes a look at the way his PAC is set up, it is clear.
Yeah.
I mean, it is somewhat buried, but it has been made crystal clear by the press that Donald has absolute discretion over 90% of all the funds that come in. That means he can use it for whatever he wants. He could go buy a fucking Bugatti with it if that's what he really wants. There is no there is absolutely no restriction, and it says so in those documents. So, of course, he would claim that everybody knew that if you gave $1, that 90 cents of that dollar, Donald had complete and total discretion over. Whether it's right or wrong, that's a whole nother story. Whether it's deceiving or deceitful to your followers, to your supporters, absolutely it is.
Right.
But I don't believe that this is one that they're going to get him on. I did want to ask you a follow-up question to the current case with Tish James. So you think that the prosecutors on behalf of the state are doing a good job. What about Trump's legal team? How do you think that they're doing?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, I think that, I'll say the weird thing here. Look, I don't think that they're doing a terribly good job overall. I mean, for one thing, it is very unclear if they either forgot to check off the box on the form that was all they needed to do in order to get a jury trial, or they purposefully decided that they wanted a bench trial and not a jury trial. This was a case in which they absolutely positively needed to get this in front of a jury, in front of it, rather than in front of the judge, in terms of having this trial. And the reason why is because Judge Engoron has also been overseeing all of the discovery in this matter. And he is the same judge who a year or so ago, it was a year and a half ago now, issued a sanctions order that ultimately resulted in Trump paying $110,000 for failing to produce documents in this matter. He was the one who was getting annoyed with them because they refused to provide Trump and Ivanka and Don Jr. and Eric for depositions. He already had no patience for them anymore. The idea that you should be having him try this case was insane. So either they screwed up and filled out the form wrong, or they purposefully did this to themselves. But either way, that was a horrible mistake that automatically lowers their grade. Now the question is, do they get an F or do they get like a D or a C minus? I do think that given their goals, they are kind of weirdly achieving them, although I think it has more to do with Trump than the lawyers. He is, I guess you give a little bit of a credit to Haba in a way. I mean, here's why. It's not really legal, it's political, right? There are two things that he's really trying to do now, because he has got a terrible case. He has no leg to stand on legally, to be clear. Like, the one thing he keeps trying to trot out is this worthless clause that he keeps referring to, the fine print, the disclaimer that says, do not trust these financial statements, effectively. The problem is that under the statutory fraud provision that we're working with here, that they've actually sued him under, you can't actually get out of that just by providing fine print or disclaimer. It doesn't matter. It's still, if it was deceptive, it was deceptive. It doesn't matter if you have that phraseology in there. So he doesn't really have a legal case to stand on here. He could try to win some points on appeal. We'll see. But what's he really been trying to do this whole time? It's all theater. Yeah. He's doing two things. One is trying to goad Judge Engoron into overreacting so that he has something that he can say, oh, the judge was biased against me, I get a new trial. It's a mistrial. Number two has nothing to do with the case at all. It's just to play his little sad violin and stick his hat out for money from his supporters.
Yeah, the court of public opinion.
I'm being martyred. Court of public opinion, the court of MAGA. Mm-hmm. Oh, look at me! I'm being crucified, and you need to give me money to save me. That's pretty much what he's doing there. So, given that those are really the main goals that he's doing, they are kind of doing them. Although, again, Trump is really doing most of the heavy lifting there with his Martyrdom Act.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. So give online therapy a try at betterhelp.com/Cohen and get on your way to being your best self. Now, you often hear me talk about PTSD, right? Post my incarceration. And you would think that being home, even though I'm home now longer than I was incarcerated with my family and my friends, should help to relieve these feelings. So for whatever reason, and one I can't explain, end of the year and holiday season, it's a lot harder to process than I thought it would be. This time of year can be a lot. for many of us, and it's natural to feel some sadness or anxiety about it. But adding something new and positive to your life can counteract some of those feelings. And therapy can be a bright spot amid all of the stress and change. Something to look forward to make you feel grounded, and to give you the tools to manage everything going on. Now, for many people, myself included, seeking therapy or opening up to another person, it's a very difficult proposition. So let me tell you what therapy offers. It's helpful for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. It empowers you to be the best version of yourself. It isn't just for those who've experienced some type of major trauma, like I did, 51 days of solitary confinement. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, to be flexible, and suited to your schedule. So just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. So find your bright spot this season with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Cohen today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Cohen.
And his outbursts. So, so I guess he's kind of achieving some goals, but does that mean he's doing well as a legal team? Not really. And I think the fact that they screwed up this jury trial thing is going to come back to haunt them in a very, very big way.
Sure. So let me just jump in and ask you a quick question on that, because I've heard certain people say that even if they did, and it's Alina Habba who failed to check the box. So assuming—
We think that's right.
Yeah. I mean, it's been acknowledged that she failed to check the box. The argument, though, is that even had she checked the box, that it would not have mattered, because based upon the type of case that it is, that it's not a case for a jury trial anyway. It was going to be a bench trial no matter what. And I'm not so sure that's right. But then again, this isn't really my area of expertise.
These cases, it's usually referred to as a special proceeding under New York law with the AG's office. The AG's office has the ability to bring its cases as special proceedings. Those are considered to be a little bit different than a garden variety legal action. And typically they are not brought as jury trials. They are usually brought as bench trials. I would have to— it's actually a good question, and I'm guessing that other people have dug even more deeply into this than I have about whether or not that's true. I know from my time there that it was very atypical for it to be a jury trial, but I don't know that it was impossible for it to have been a jury trial. I think it could have been something where they could have moved for it and they might have succeeded at getting it. But I hear that, though. So it's possible that that's right, but I also hear that, and I kind of feel like that's somewhere in there. That might be some after the game rationalization for why they didn't check the box off. That might be bullshit, but I'm not sure. So it's a good question. Could they have actually done it? But the fact that it only came to light, there was all the hubbub when this first came out. They didn't even check the box off. For the first 2 days, no one made that point. That, that was because they couldn't have checked the box off. They weren't allowed to. No one made that point. It feels fishy. It feels like something that people came up with after the fact.
Tristan, what's going to be really funny is after Donald loses, and he's already lost the liability portion of this case. He's lost that.
That's right.
This is now a case based upon damages, the disgorgement aspect of the case. And I personally, and being that I had been involved in this trial, I think that Trump's lawyers are doing a terrible job in terms of reducing how much Judge Engoron can disgorge the Trump Corporation based on, having people come in and make claims that are completely irrelevant to what the judge is looking for certainly doesn't advance anyone's belief that they have a clue on how to limit how much money that the Trump Corporation will have to pay. So I personally find that they're doing an absolutely terrible job. the one thing that I agree with you on is the fact that they are absolutely playing this for a court of public opinion. And that's what he's going to do. He's going to try to ride this all the way to the end, and hope that there will be an appealable issue. They're going to try. My question, though, I wanted to ask you, assuming that it comes out to the $250 million, I think it's more because of penalty, interest, and so on. How much? Let's assume it's the 250 baseline that Tish James put in her complaint. Now he files the appeal. We already know that, even if it's for $1. He files the appeal. How long do you think that appeal will take before which the appellate court, and does this go to the Second Circuit?
Yeah.
And if it does, how long?
No. It won't. It will go to, it's a state court case. It's being tried here in Manhattan, New York County. So it's a New York County Supreme Court is what it's called, is basically our district court here. And then from here, it goes to what's called the Appellate Division First Department. So for listeners, it's akin to like the circuit court system, but within New York, we have 4 departments based on the geographical region of the state.
Right.
That's
one
the
is
intermediate
Manhattan.
level appellate court. And the first department covers Manhattan. It's going to go there, and then from there it would go to the New York Court of Appeals, which is our state's high court. And from there it could go. You can apply for cert to go to the Supreme Court to appeal a state court final opinion, but they're not granted very often, and I don't think they would get granted in this case. The Supreme Court, I would believe, is not going to take on this matter. The Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, usually stays away from hearing appeals of purely state law matters. There is no federal law involved in this matter, so it's unlikely that the U.S. Supreme Court would weigh in. So whatever the New York Court of Appeals does is probably going to be the final word on this matter. I think that this could take at least a year, sadly. I think it's going to be a long process. The appeals courts in New York do not work super quickly. They don't really work that quickly at the federal level either. These things take time, sadly. And so I think we're going to near the end of the trial phase for this matter. There's going to be a bunch of post-trial motions, but then I think we're going to end up in an appeals process that will be frustratingly lengthy.
Yeah, which is exactly what Trump wants. Just push it, delay.
Yeah,
that's the
if he has
absolute
no
game.
other cards left to play. That's right. Yeah, and that's sort of a through line that I talk about. I talk about the HABA, the box checking thing. I talk about the counterattacks, and I also talk about the delay factor of this. That's all through the book that I just did that's coming out. Like, we get into all of that because that's like the delay thing is really part of the key. It helps him with statute of limitations things. It helps him with kind of, being able to keep raising money in the meantime. In this case, he's trying to kick any can down the road to post November 2024. He wants any of these damaging things to happen to him if they're going to happen. He wants to have them happen in 2025. That's his goal right now. So what this also means, though, is all of the good things that have already happened: the finding of liability for fraud, the finding that the cancellation of corporate charters is an appropriate remedy, that could result in the receivership and liquidation of most of Trump's New York properties. All of that is that is all on pause right now. It will probably remain on pause or stayed, as it's called, pending the appeal. I don't think any of that is going to take place until the appellate process is played out, which I do think is going to take at least a year.
Yeah. So let me ask you this then, because I've often said that the motherload of documents that Trump was hiding at Mar-a-Lago, that he was going to use them to benefit himself. Get out of jail free card, sell them to the highest bidder, use it, to obtain some sort of a benefit. And I believed that he would somehow, again, try to leverage this information. In your opinion, do you think that he sold or traded that information? Obviously, there is a case right now that is pending, and it is a criminal case. What are you hearing about this, and what's your opinion on it?
I think purely in my opinion, I think that there's a pretty good probability that he actually did give them that. Was money exchanged? I don't think that as much. I think it was more of a favor trading situation. I think there is a good chance that he did that, but that's purely my opinion. I also do think there is a good chance that he did this so he would have them. He would have them in his tool belt, but he never actually got around to using them in the way that he was thinking he might have to use them, because it was clear that the feds were on to him by the spring and summer of 22, and so he never actually did any favor trading with any of these documents. But what he was doing clearly is he was waving them around or referring to them or talking about them as a way to look impressive to people. It doesn't matter that he was the frickin' president of the United States. He still is so insecure that he felt this like gnawing need to puff himself up in front of random guests that show up at one of his properties and like talk like he's a big guy still. And it's like, and thereby he was showing these things off. But was he then actually using them to trade for favors? I do think that there's a good possibility that he did so. For one thing, where did all the missing documents go? We've forgotten about that. This case has been going on long enough now. Remember that they found when they did they served the search warrant and they did the search, the FBI, there were a bunch of folders that were empty.
Yep.
And those folders had various classified markings on them. Also, as a number of people have pointed out, a number of those documents that they did find, and then they took photographs of them on the floor with that hideous carpet. We all know that picture. A number of those photos, a number of folks that know more about national security stuff than I do have pointed out that a number of those documents look to be copies, not originals, because in the original, that colored border would go all the way to the edge of the paper, and they don't in these documents that were there on the floor. So those are not the originals; those are copies. If that is true, I don't know that that's true, but if that is true, it raises more questions about like, well, where the heck did the rest of these documents go to? So there are a lot of question marks there that make me believe that there's something else that we don't know.
Okay, so here's the scenario, the way I see it.
Yeah.
It's actually one of the reasons why I do truly want to throw my hat in primary Jerry Nadler for the 12th Congressional District here in New York. I'm dead serious about it, too. If my wife would give me the thumbs up, I'd be in the race tomorrow. I'm not joking you. And I'm going to tell you why. Because we know that there were empty file folders. Now, the nice thing is the documentation that is involved can be backtracked. So they know that if file number 1-2345667, you know that there are corresponding documents. If you go into that through their mainframe, it could tell you that file folder had 7 pieces of paper into it. It could have been marked eyes only, meaning for the person who wrote it. It could have been for a committee. I don't know what it would relate to, but we do know that there are missing empty file folders. And we also know that they have the ability to go back and figure out what documents were in there, depending upon whether or not, again, it was for eyes only. Maybe there were no copies made. I don't know. But on some of them, there must be. We're talking about our national security. We're talking about things that affect whether it's agents, whether it's other countries' national security. They're marked classified, top secret for a reason. All right. The fact that there is not already, forgetting about an investigation, fuck that. Enough already with the slow walking bullshit. This is like putting a toddler on on, for example, wheels on a bicycle with training wheels. And now he's 20 years old and he's still riding the bicycle with training wheels. He knows how to do it. He knows that they need to move the case, not just expeditiously. It needs to be done like lightning, because our national security is in jeopardy. And the Orange Jesus, the Mandarin Mussolini, is out there showing this shit to people. And that's the stuff that he still has, not even the stuff that's missing. I don't understand what our congressional committees are doing. It is our safety, and more important than anything else right now, more important than climate change, more important than the price of fuel, more important than the economy, is the national security and the safety of all Americans. That's the president's first duty as president of the United States to those of us, including those that didn't vote for him. That is his duty, to ensure your safety. If there's something out there, which there is, I don't care what anybody says, if you have missing papers from a top secret classified folder, we need to know where those documents are, what they did with them, and who has them now. Otherwise, we could be in serious trouble as a country. Why? Why have they not done something?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're on to something there, Michael. I think that the kicker here is, it's the Senate. The Senate still has the ability. I mean, you have a Democratic Senate, and now you even have got to a point where it's 51-49. The first period there was 50-50. You basically had tied committees, so you couldn't really get anything out of committee. You couldn't have voted subpoenas out of a committee up until it's now 51-49. But it is 51-49 now. And so they actually do have a majority, and a lot of committees have 18 members in the Senate, and it's 10-8 in favor of the Democrats. There are plenty of opportunities now to launch new investigations into what has happened in some of these matters. And it is really long past time for there to be some additional effort being taken here. This is something else that I've now written about, and I'm going to be talking about more, is it's about what we can do, right? What we can do as private citizens. And a lot of the answer is, would we have really had what we have now? And we've got the J6 trial of Trump happening starting in February in DC, right? That indictment, would it have ever happened had it not been for the January 6th committee in the House? I don't know. I don't know if it ever would have happened. It really does appear that committee's work and the political impetus that underlaid it was a lot of, it might have had a very strong impact, and maybe the pivotal impact on DOJ finally appointing a special counsel and setting up Jack Smith with his office to actually go pursue these things. Not just to go after the ground troops who broke the windows and smashed people up and injured and assaulted and scarred these police officers and desecrated our Capitol. That had already been happening, okay? We'd already been going after those guys, but going after the ringleaders and actually going all the way up to the top.
I don't know. I haven't seen one single member of Congress being held accountable, and
well,
we
haven't
know,
done that yet.
But we know, for example, that there were members of Congress that led groups through the Capitol prior to, so that they knew exactly where Nancy Pelosi's office was.
Yes.
They knew exactly where the hearings were being conducted. They had a roadmap of where to go, how to do it, and so on. Nobody other than a bunch of fucking dummies, a bunch of redneck idiots with 4 teeth and 3 fucking brain cells. They're the only ones, like Stuart Rhodes, 18 years, while the rest of these guilty son of a bitches are all running free and clear. I don't get it. I'm frustrated.
Or they're going to be very, yeah. Yeah. Well, no, and the sentences that they gave to those guys that actually committed a lot of the violence have been insanely low, ridiculous. These guys are getting put away for like 2-3 years, and it should be 20 or 30. Like that's another problem. Okay, but to get back to your point about the Mar-a-Lago case, look, I do believe that a lot of our job to try to move these things along, we need to insist on the justice and accountability happening. We can't just put these people in office and then hope that they're going to do a good job. Like, we need to keep up public pressure to make sure that these guys have the courage and the wherewithal and the resources to be able to do their jobs. And if they don't seem to have that backbone, we sometimes need to provide it for them. And I think that may be what we need to do with some of these matters if we think that they're going too slowly. And some of it could be DOJ's fault with how they've handled
a lot
the
of
Mar-a-Lago
it is DOJ's fault.
I think a lot of it. And then there's some of it that just with the indictment that they did bring that now is being held up by Judge Cannon. I think that now is maybe the time that we need to see action take on Capitol Hill for the Senate to start opening up investigations into what is happening here in parallel, the way that they did, and move it along, the way that they did with the J6, way that they did with the J6 investigation.
Tristan, as a citizen, I did it exactly the way that you're describing. I filed my FOIA request. Yeah. And I write this in my book, Revenge. I filed the FOIA request. They come back with a response. There are no documents that are responsive to your request. I know they're lying because somehow I had 4 documents that were exactly responsive. So I turn it over to counsel who files the action. And all of a sudden, 2 or 3 months later, they respond back, oops, sorry, you're right. This is under, by the way, now a Democratic president. I'm asking for these FOIA documents. It turns out there's 486,000 documents. So it went from zero, nothing there, to 400. Right. And to this day, I am now coming on the 20th month since the judge said that they need to process 500 documents a month. I have not received a single document. Any one of these documents will show that Donald, through his willing and complicit Attorney General, Bill Barr, unconstitutionally remanded a United States citizen to prison because that citizen refused to waive their First Amendment constitutional right. And if that doesn't scare the shit out of you, there's something fucking wrong with you. And I keep trying to say that. And so many members of Congress, so many, Congressman Steve Cohen, Congressman Dan Goldman, Congressman Jamie Raskin, Senator Dick Durbin, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, and Ted Lieu, they've all asked for investigations to be open. And so far, nothing. So I can understand why citizens today say, what the fuck do you want me to do? What do you think I can do? Right. Government, and it's a democratic, administration right now. What's the chance I'm going to get a single document under, God forbid, another Trump administration? And the answer is zero. But you know what? You know what the answer is under this administration? Under somebody like a Merrick Garland's DOJ? Fucking zero too. That's why people have no faith in our government. But speaking about having no faith, I want to ask you this then. I want to talk for a second about Judge Chutkan and how she denied Trump's efforts to gain immunity. Now, do me a favor, explain to my listeners this whole scenario as well as what's your take. How do you think that she's handling Trump?
I think so far so good. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens when they're actually looking at each other, about 50 feet away from one another coming up very soon, and see if she is able to keep her cool as well as I think Judge Engoron has in New York. But so far, so good. She certainly was not afraid of throwing punches in that opinion, which I think, rightly so, was very, very dismissive, literally and figuratively, of Trump's arguments there. So what's going on here is that Trump was basically trying to say, well, because I'm a former president, I'm immune from this prosecution. Goodbye, I get out. And, as far-fetched as that would seem, it was actually an argument that at least needed to be taken somewhat seriously and given the legal analysis and so forth and so on. And we got a decision from her and we got a decision from an appeals court, all basically saying no, that's not how it works. After you leave the office, there's zero doctrine to say that you get any other special privileges in terms of immunity from prosecution. What do you get when you leave the White House? You get a pension, you get a Secret Service detail, you get money from Congress for a presidential library, unless your name is Donald Trump, in which case you don't read, so you haven't actually bothered to set up a library yet, and probably never will,
It's
unless
called
it's
the
in a prison.
It's called the porta potty.
It'll be the porta potty at Leavenworth. I don't know.
Exactly.
We'll see where we'll see where hopefully he ends up. But the kicker is that you don't get this other stuff. You don't get it. So we've got there's look. It's not hard to come up with that as a doctrine, and it's only the most completely out there judge could possibly go along with that argument. If it were ever allowed, it would be the sign that our entire republic is dead. Like, that's obviously what would happen. Like, if we're going to start handing immunity to former presidents, like, that's just the end. I
like the decision. I like the statement that she made in that decision. It's just like, it is not a get out of jail free card for the rest of your life, simply because you were the former president. I just thought it was, not only was it comical, it was really poignant.
It was very poignant. She really laid it on thick. I think it needed to be done. And it was a bit of a shot across the bow to Trump and his lawyers that they better get ready, because she is not going to be taking shit from anybody. I do expect to see her have a very firm hand on the courtroom. And that is a very, very, very key thing. When you have cases where you have a high-profile defendant on trial and you have a judge who is not willing to take that gavel and use it, that is when problems happen. It happened in the O.J. Simpson case, because where the judge really didn't do enough to actually rein in the counsel for Simpson. It happened in one of the high-profile John Gotti cases back in the 80s. The judge lost complete control of the courtroom, and the lawyers for Gotti basically spent a bunch of time successfully tarring and defaming the U.S. attorneys on that matter. You can't have a situation like that where the bench loses control of the court, of the courtroom, and doesn't manage to rein in the attorneys on both sides. Mm-hmm. So the fact that Judge Chutkan has been there saying, like, I got this, I'm on this, and you give me a bullshit argument, I'm going to whack it away.
Yeah.
So I think that it's a very good sign for everybody there. And it really reestablished the principle that any such privilege that a president might have while in office, which, by the way, I disagree with, and I disagree with DOJ's memo on this very much, but any such privilege that you possibly could come up with ends the moment that their presidency is over. It applies to the office, not to the individual.
I say this all the time, and some people, especially the ones who really hate Trump the most, I don't want to see Donald Trump indicted, prosecuted, convicted, or sentenced simply because I fundamentally disagree with him or I don't like him.
Right.
I want to see him indicted, prosecuted, convicted, and sentenced because he broke the law. It's called accountability. Right. And trust me, I know I went to fucking prison for things I didn't even do. And every day I fight in order to educate the uneducatable, the idiots that are out there that, oh, you're a liar, you're a rat, those are all Trump's words. They refuse to acknowledge, I never paid Karen McDougal, but yet I was charged. I never committed tax evasion, though, it's a tax omission. I'm not even going to get into it because I talk about it all the time. I wrote a whole fucking book on it. Let me jump into something even more important for my listeners here, because there are some, and I think you'll acknowledge this, there's some really very, very capable prosecutors who have now, they have Trump in their sights. Which of all of these cases, and sometimes it's very hard to keep track, but which of the cases do you think will have the most impact on his future? And do you think that he'll ultimately end up in jail based upon any one of them?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And yeah, it's kind of where I end up at the sort of tail end of my book, Taking Down Trump. In the epilogue, I really talk about all the different cases and where I think they're headed. And I think that the overall arc is that before the New York AG's office in the Trump University and Trump Foundation cases really showed that there were ways to kind of, score some hit points on the Death Star, not a lot of people were beating him very little, almost never. Michael, you probably can't think of too many times when you were working with him that anybody actually beat you guys. I'm guessing.
No.
Probably just didn't happen.
In fact, if it
You
wasn't for the whole presidency, I'm not even sure that the New York AG's case against Trump University would have resulted in the success that it
might not
did.
have. It might not have. It was going to go to trial, and it might not have won. And then the civil case in San Diego was going to go to trial, and it might not have won.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely the fact that look, after the November election, and he was declared the winner, that was when the settlements happened. He didn't want the distraction right when he was about to go to the White House.
In all fairness, Tristan, he knew he was going to lose. He knew he was going to lose.
Yeah.
But what he didn't want is he didn't want that loss while he was president. Because that, of course, would diminish.
It would have been embarrassing.
Right. It's his inflated ego. But please continue.
Yeah. Yeah, it would have been embarrassing. Yeah. There was definitely a chance that he could have beaten the plaintiffs in both of those cases, including the AG's case. But I think that until then, though, until you saw those victories happen in 2017 is when the Trump University case went final. 2019 is when the Trump Foundation case resulted in that settlement and shutting down the foundation and all of that. Until those cases, you didn't really see a lot of prosecutors even try to go after him, or if they did, they kind of backed away. You didn't see private litigants really succeed too much against him until that point either. Now I think we've seen, and this is what taking down Trump is, it's a playbook for people being able to see, like, how do you actually beat him in a prosecution or a litigation? And like you said, the people that have their sights on him now, they clearly understand the playbook. They understand what they need to do. They've been following it. And now you're starting to see the results of all of that. And so I think that if I had to say, I really think that this case in DC before Judge Chuin is really, I think that's going to be extremely powerful. It is a very narrowly drawn case. They did not indict him with a ton of charges, but I think that was on purpose. They really went lasered in on the I think it's 5 counts that they really thought they could get him on, that they had him dead to rights on. And I think you're going to see an enormous amount of very powerful testimony. The headliners are going to be people like Mike Pence and probably Mark Meadows. I think it's going to be very, very difficult for a jury to come away with any other conclusion than that Trump is guilty. The case is going to be in DC. The judge has shown that she's not taking bullshit from anybody. The case has not been delayed, which is key. Like it's going to jury selection on February 5th, I believe. She moved it up. The case is gonna happen for the election. I actually think that it'll be the first of the cases to go to a criminal trial, and I think we might get the conviction right there.
And which one of these cases do you think will ultimately, or which would be the first one that sends him up the river?
To send him to prison. So I think Judge Chuin, I think that case is I think Jack Smith and his team are going to get the first conviction right there. I do. I believe they're going to get it. Then that's going to get appealed, but I think that it's possible that we could get some expedition put on the appeals, given that he will be the Republican nominee for president. He's going to be on the ballot. So
I'm not 100% certain on that one, by the way.
You're not okay, maybe not, but I think right now, unless we know otherwise, that's probably what's going to happen. You've got to hope that in that situation, the appeals courts could step on it and actually hear the appeals faster. I don't think it's going to get overturned on appeal. It could be that the final bit of that is that he tries to get the Supreme Court to hear it and they decline, and that could be that his efforts to avoid prison sort of go out with a whimper, not a bang. I think it's possible that he actually could go to prison in 2024. I do. I do also. I actually don't think it's crazy.
It's one of the reasons.
I think that he could.
Yep. It's one of the reasons, Tristan's why.
I think go ahead.
No, it's one of the reasons why he is out there right now threatening people like Mark Milley, threatening other individuals, because he's sending a message that, again, if he wins, the first thing he's doing is rewriting the Constitution. He's getting rid of the legislative branch, the judiciary, and conferring all power to the executive branch. He's sending a quiet message to Supreme Court judges. I don't give a flying shit about you and your fucking black robe, especially those of you who I appointed to the Supreme Court. If you do me dirty, I'm gonna send my task force when I have that power. We're gonna show up to your house, we're gonna lock you up, and we're gonna send you up to Guantanamo Bay. The same thing that he's saying to the uber rich. Your money is not your money. Right? When the United States government, the full power of the government is in my hands, you will be in serious trouble. That's what he's doing.
Yeah. I mean, the desperation is really key here. And then I think he's doing, there's a lot of message sending. There's a lot of witness intimidation. That's a lot of what this is that he's sending messages to all these people that are about to testify against him. So there's that one. And then I think we're going to see a trial in the Atlanta case at some point in the spring. I think that one, I think they've done a really great job. I think that they've pulled together an enormous amount of material, and they've gone after all of these other defendants, not just Trump. And it was a Herculean effort that they've undertaken for themselves. That said, I do worry about that office, the Fulton County DA's office, and them having, I think it's been really like they deserve a medal for what they've done with the resources that they've got versus the feds, because they have pulled together an even bigger case despite having way fewer resources. I still think that they're going to be able to get a conviction in that matter too, but it's a bigger case and there's a lot more moving parts. And I just think that it could get delayed a little bit more. And so it might not be the winner, so to speak, in terms of what's going to get the first conviction, first sentencing. I don't have any. Now, look, I think that if the Mar-a-Lago case were being brought in front of a normal judge, that case would have been almost done by now.
Yep.
Because it's really cut and dried. The evidence is extremely overwhelming, and they've got so much good material. And they've got videotapes. They've got the IT guy who was told to delete the videotapes. They've got an enormous amount of stuff on him there. But the problem is Judge Cannon. So I don't know if that one's going anywhere anytime soon. And then it's been very clear that in the case that you'll be testifying in, Michael, that case, the judge has made it clear that they intend to take a back seat to these other cases. And I think you guys are in for a scheduling conference in February to determine when that trial will happen.
That's assuming the other cases, but that assumes that the other cases are moving forward. If in fact that there's delays in any of those cases, then Alvin Bragg will move forward with the March date. Absolutely.
I hope that they then jump in. But I have a feeling that we might not be seeing that one right away.
It's possible.
So we'll see.
And I'll tell you one thing about Judge Chutkan. Judge Chutkan, in my opinion, if in fact that he is found guilty, I believe that she remands him pending appeal. I don't think that he gets bonded out. I think that there's a whole series of things here that she can and will do, specifically under the guise that he's a flight risk. He has not one but two airplanes.
I think he is.
He's got dozens and dozens of friends who have private planes. He's got property overseas. He has people who he can turn to, like Mohammed bin Salman, or maybe his best friend now, the president of Hungary, right? Orban. I mean, there's plenty of places that he can go to avoid extradition. And I could see her, based upon his actions and the attacks on judges and staff and the families and witnesses. And so I could really see her doing something like that. But Tristan, look, as the hour comes to we can get lost in this for hours, because I got about at least a dozen more questions for you. I want to ask you this at the end. What are the chances that the supposedly bipartisan group, No Labels, will disrupt the 2024 election? I mean, who does somebody, for example, like Joe Manchin hurt more, the Democrats or the Republicans?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, look, my sort of initial response is, I don't really, if they're banking on Joe Manchin to be a vote getter for them, then go ahead. That's great in my opinion. Manchin is not a very scintillating personality, so I don't really see him being able to get a lot of votes based on his performance. If they want to run him, though, great. If they want to run him with Kirsten Sinema, given that she's not going to win that Senate seat, her fundraising is terrible. She's not actually getting Republicans to support her in Arizona or with money. Go ahead. Who is it really? I don't know that they're really going to disrupt things too much, but the problem is that even a little bit of damage might be very, very problematic. Who will they take more votes away from? I think it's an open question. I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of people that are not going to be able to bring themselves to vote for Biden. They would stay home or hold their nose and vote for Trump, who might be willing to then support no labels or something else. I don't know if people that were already planning on voting for Biden are going to vote for no labels. There going to be some, but I don't know if it's going to be in enough numbers to really do a lot of damage. And at the end of the day, even if they pull like a couple percentage points nationally, is it going to be enough to tilt the balance in any particular state? I don't know. I'm not super worried about them, but it's obviously something that bears a lot of watching, because even a small problem here could have catastrophic effects.
I don't think that the election is going to be as close as media right now is portraying. In fact, and I'm a skeptic of the media. I was when I questioned Breonna Keeler with the famous Says Who. Interestingly enough, I was right. When I turned around and I said, I knew the poll that she was referring to, and I knew it was bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
If you are going to poll, say, 70% of Democratic voters who have voted Democrat the last 10 elections, what do you think the outcome is going to be? I believe that many in the media right now are skewing the polls in order to keep people active, enticed, committed to their television. Because when you start talking about, for example, I saw this yesterday, Donald is increasing his base of Muslims. And the first thing I say is bullshit. This is a guy who the first thing he tried to do in 2017, not do an infrastructure bill, a Muslim ban. He wants to outlaw an entire religion from this country. Then you say, oh, well, he's improving with blacks as well. And I say, this is a man who refused to utter the name George Floyd or any other black male who was killed, right, for no reason whatsoever. He couldn't have the empathy to go ahead and to say what's going on here is wrong. No. He starts going, Black Lives Matter, everything is Black Lives Matter, or Antifa, and so on. And then they're now the Hispanic vote. I'm not talking about the Cubans. I'm talking about Hispanic votes. Oh, Univision. And so, bullshit. This is a guy who came out day number one before even just announcing he's going to run for president, attacking Mexicans as rapists, murderers, drug dealers. But don't worry, there's a few good ones. The same thing with Jews. Do we not remember Charlottesville and his refusal to denounce David Duke and so on? These aren't Michael Cohen's words. These aren't Tristan Snell's words. These are Donald fucking Trump's words. Plain and simple. And yet the polls are saying, oh, and he's doing better now, allegedly, with Gen Z. Really? The only generation that has lost civil rights, that have lost in the last 50 plus years? I'm not buying any of this bullshit. And I think that a blue wave is going to be much more significant than people even imagine.
Yeah, I think that the proof is in the pudding with like the poll. Look, there are two problems there. One you I just identified, which is that the media is going to want to report on these polls and I think possibly conduct them in such a way that it looks like a really tight horse race, because that's better for ratings. I think there's definitely an issue there. The other issue is that on the Republican side, they are definitely doing a lot of work to basically flood the zone. And they've been doing this for years now, flood the zone with a bunch of skewed polls that make these races look better for Republicans than they actually are, because it's better for donors. They want to make the donors feel like it's a tighter race because they're more likely to give. If they understood that it really was looking as bleak as it was, they might not be giving nearly as much. That's a lot of why they do it there. So what the proof's in the pudding. The best evidence for what's really going on out in America is when we actually have people vote in these special elections or off-year elections, state elections, whatever. And there you look at Virginia, where it was, the whole narrative going in was like, well, Glenn Youngkin's really close to being able to take over the other house of the Virginia legislature, and then he's going to be able to do what he wants and pass an abortion ban and do more book banning and do this and do that. And instead, it went completely the other direction.
Yeah,
not only did the Republicans not take the one house that they were trying to take, they lost the one they had.
Yeah.
And now both houses in Virginia are now Democratic. They lost that Wisconsin Supreme Court seat. They lost the Pennsylvania legislature. Like, they lost the mayoralty of Jacksonville, Florida, which up to that point had been the largest Republican mayor's office in the country. In a county, there, Duval County in Florida, had been I think it was 11 points in favor of DeSantis, and then only a year later it went 4 points in favor of the Democratic candidate for mayor.
Yep.
15-point swing in 1 year.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer.
So you're telling me that, like, and then look at what happened in Ohio.
Yep.
In Ohio, where it's like, Ohio was like, great, now abortion's in our state constitution. And by the way, we're legalizing weed while we're at it. It's like, do they really think there's this massive red wave out there that wants to return Trump to power? Like, look at what's actually happened when people have had to cast a ballot. If you extrapolate from that, and then you look at the fundamental economic numbers, which are the best that they've been since we started keeping all of this data, in terms of GDP growth, high inflation, mostly back to normal, employment at historic lows. If any other president had those fundamental economic numbers, you'd say they were going to cruise to re-election.
Yeah, they would.
The numbers for Joe Biden right now look better than they did for Ronald Reagan in 1984.
They put him up on Mount Rushmore. So, Tristan, let me thank you, my brother.
Yeah, they wanted to.
Yep, they would put, not Donald. They would put Joe Biden up on Mount Rushmore if anybody had his numbers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Tristan, let me thank you, my brother, for joining us. There's going to be a lot more to talk about as more of these cases. So I hope I'm going to ask you to come back. We're going to talk more about as additional decisions start coming, maybe even another indictment soon. So Tristan, thank you, my friend, for joining us. And I will definitely be speaking to you again.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael. Take care.
Thank you too.